Hi, Carl. Thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Carl Jones. I currently reside in Seattle, Washington. I am an aerospace engineer by trade. I went to the University of Michigan, graduated there in 2007. I have a master's in engineering management. I currently work at Boeing for Boeing commercial airplanes, primarily on the 767 program and the 787 program as well too, as a systems engineer. Um, I'm also in the Navy. My active duty job in the Navy was as a naval flight officer flying the E-2C Hawkeye. I've just under about 1,000 hours in that aircraft, along with like 3 or 4 other training aircraft that I've also flown. And I'll hit 15 years in the Navy in January. So currently in the reserves, I did 10 years. Sorry, my oven's going off. I did 10 years active, and then I've been in the reserves ever since.
Is there a plane that you've had dreams of flying that you haven't gotten a chance to fly yet?
Um, Oh no, well, I kind of flew the Growler. I flew in the Growler. I didn't get to fly it myself. So I won't count that one a buddy of mine, I got to take a ride in the back seat of a Growler. So the EA-18G, it looks like a Super Hornet, but it's a jamming platform and does electronic warfare and electronic attacks. So I get to fly in that. I've flown in jets, so I've kind of crossed that off my list already. And I'm trying to think like what else haven't I like honestly, like the Osprey kind of interests me. Just I kind of see it as like an engineering marvel, even though there's kind of a lot of problems with it. But I've never gotten a chance to take a ride in Osprey, so that's been something I've been wanting to do.
Now, drones, unmanned aerial aircraft have become quite the thing lately. Do you see a point where there's like no piloted airplanes, at least in warfare?
For warfare purposes, no, I don't see that. Drones are very helpful and useful in such as like air-to-air refueling and kind of sending them out as you can use them in a variety of other different ways. When you don't want to put someone's kind of life in danger, you can kind of use them to kind of go ahead of that. But I think there's always going to be a need for manned aircraft. For example, like with the Hawkeye, with what I fly, it's for those who don't know, it's airborne early warning. So we kind of call it the Navy AWACS. So Air Force has AWACS. It's just a bigger version of their plane or a smaller version of their plane. Our plane flies off the carrier. So be surprised the number of people who don't know that the Navy flies off carriers. But anyways, with the Hawkeye, like it's a crew of five, so two pilots, three naval flight officers in the back operating the weapons system and the weapons suite. Like that is not going to be able to be done by a drone. There's just no way. So to manage the battle space appropriately, like you need those people, and my aircraft is kind of key in that. So I don't see that happening. I could see in ways where drones would be helpful in assisting, but yeah, I don't see it ever replacing manned aviation. And I think I would feel a little uncomfortable. I know this has been like a topic of conversation for like even commercial. I've been hearing it just by random pilots at work. On the commercial side, replacing pilots or going to a single pilot and AI flying a plane is like I don't think I would feel comfortable with that. I'd rather have two pilots as backup. So yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a time when manned aviation or manned naval aviation at least is ever going to be replaced by drones.
Have you always been interested in flying and aviation and aerospace? I mean, can you trace back your interest to like a specific moment in time?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been flying on just like commercial aircraft since I was like 7 years old, and I was always obsessed. And I mean, back then, going into airports, like we didn't have the tight security regulations that we currently do. So like you could walk right up to the gate. My parents would send me to my grandmother's house, and they would walk me to the gate, and I would walk down the jetway by myself and get on the plane, and I knew where to get off and do all that stuff. So I was always fascinated by planes in space. I was got very into it at a young age, probably in like elementary school. I got very fascinated with space. I think the what triggered it was we started learning about Neil Armstrong and the first moon landing, and that's kind of like where it kind of took off because I had to write a book report about it. Um, and so that's definitely where it took off. And then when I remember like in fifth grade, we went to the planetarium, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And so getting to do that, that was where that kind of started. So I never saw myself flying. Like the Navy was never a part of my plan, to be quite honest. I always had an interest in aerospace, always had an interest in space, but I never saw myself actually flying a plane. I just, for some reason, it initially it didn't appeal to me. I used to joke. I don't jump anymore. At least I would like to get back into it. But I used to skydive. But I used to joke that I jump out of planes. I don't fly them. But getting into the Navy and going down that path, I'm very happy that I did, because it basically it created something in me, or I discovered something in me that I was very interested in that I didn't know was there. So that definitely helped foster it. But yeah, from a young age, I was always obsessed with space, spacecraft, anything related to space, anything I could learn, I would absorb, anything related to that.
And you mentioned Neil Armstrong, first person to walk on the moon back in 1969. I was wondering when you became aware of like the Artemis program to actually send people back to the moon.
I mean, I became aware of the Artemis program because I worked at Johnson Space Center. I started there in 2019 after I got off active duty. And I think that was around the time, maybe a little bit before that, when they started talking about Artemis. Um, or at least maybe that I had heard about it. I think maybe I'd heard like kind of rumblings about it like in the years prior to that. Um, but I didn't really, obviously, getting into that environment and being around it every day, you're going to hear a lot more about it. So that was, I think, once I started actually working there at NASA, that's when I started to hear a lot more, about going forward. And then, at the time, I think it was Vice President Pence kind of made the push that, we're going to go back to the moon. And I think by 2026. So then you really started to hear a whole lot about it.
Well, interestingly enough, back in that time it was 2024, which is
Anyway, yeah, you're
well,
right. It was 2024. Forgot
so
about that.
I'm excited to be finishing my project at the end of this month, but a little disappointed that it didn't coincide with the promised moonwalk.
Yeah.
What do you think about us going back to the moon?
I think it's an excellent idea. I think the way that we're kind of going about it is great. If I had a chance to kind of work on the Gateway program, if I had ever had an opportunity, I would love to. Um, I'm curious and interested to see like what, I guess, the overall plan of going back to the moon is. I know part of it is kind of getting ready to see if we can do longer distance space travel and going to Mars. I'm excited to see now that NASA's kind of working with all these different companies and seeing what they can kind of put together in terms of suits and lunar landers and all that different types of stuff, and kind of seeing that. And so, in my lifetime, I've never seen anyone walk on the moon, um, or at least not that I can recall. Um, I've never seen anyone walk on the moon, so to see that happen, in my lifetime would be pretty cool. So I think there's definitely a huge advantage. I mean, going to space, anyways, like space has given us so many things in terms of research, and science, and in cures and medicine and in our everyday life that I don't think a lot of people actually realize. And I think going to the moon and kind of rekindling this and restarting this, even for longer duration space travel, or just living in space at some point and trying to see if we can survive in space, and terraform it, I think is going to be a key to the next part of our future down the line.
Talking about that future, whenever you think out to like 200 years in the future, and that's an incredibly long time. I'm just trying to think about what it was like in 1824 and have trouble wrapping my head around that. I can only imagine what 2224 is going to be like.
Yeah.
But do you see a future in 200 years where we live on multiple planets, or you think we're still on Earth making these little, sorties out there?
That's a good question. Let me think about that. 200 years from now, I mean, given the way that technology has kind of been going about, honestly, like, yeah, I could see us in another 200 years. I could probably see us, if not being on multiple planets, at least have established some type of outpost in space, and maybe a lot of the world or a lot of people have gone between. Earth is still around, but you also have a larger contingent of people now living in space, and working there, and that's their lives, and maybe even being born there, and that's all they know. um, us figuring that out. So I could definitely see that happening in another 200 years, um, especially if climate change kind of continues going the way that it's going. Like it's, for better or for worse, and honestly probably for worse, like we're kind of going down that path where we're going to start destroying the earth, so unless we do something about it. um But yeah, I think multiple planets, hopefully. Um, the problem is it's going to be that long duration travel of trying to get everyone there. And I think that's what we're going to have to kind of figure everything out, or figure out first, and is how to safely get humans from point A to point B, either in suspended animation or some type of way, because obviously, like, as you and I know, like, you suffer from muscle atrophy and bone atrophy, with the lack of gravity, or in microgravity rather, in space. And so that's going to be something that, the astronauts train for, what, like 2 3 years to go to space. And so taking the average human being, and putting them into that environment is going to be a challenge when they haven't been conditioned and trained and ready. So there's a lot of things that we have to kind of figure out first, but I think, before we can even get there. But I would like to think that hopefully in 200 years, maybe we'll have that figured out.
That's an awesome vision. If you had a chance to go to space, would you?
Absolutely. I probably can't cuss on here, but yes, without a doubt, in a heartbeat. If you told me that I had a chance to go to space tomorrow, I would pack up my things and I would go. Absolutely.
You think you'll get a chance in your lifetime?
I hope so. One way or another. I'm constantly looking for ways. I mean, whenever the next astronaut class gets announced for applications, which I haven't seen, maybe I missed it or something, but I'm still going to continue applying. But now that all these other companies are, even though I kind of frown on the whole space tourism thing, if that's my only way to kind of get to space, then I'll take it. But ideally, like, I would love to go to space and kind of spend some extended time up there. I don't need to be up there for a year. But if I got to spend 6 months up there, I think that'd be kind of cool. And that would be definitely a highlight, and something that because I've wanted to go to space my entire life, quite honestly. I still have dreams of being an astronaut. So, yeah, I would go yeah, with hands down, I would go.
Awesome. Well, that's pretty much my standard questions. Unless you had something else, I'll go ahead and stop the recording.
No, I think that's about it. The only other thing, I kind of thought about this now, because you asked me earlier, like, what plane would I want to fly? So I have had dreams, even though I've flown in a P3, I've always wanted to also fly with the Hurricane Hunters, and fly into a hurricane in a P3, and do studying with that, because that seems like a very, very cool job to me too.
It's amazing to have a plane that strong and that powerful to be able to
Yeah.
fight nature so much.
Yep.
Well,
Awesome, man.
thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the opportunity.
I'll talk to you later.
All right. See you.